how you can do things like freedom of information requests to obtain reports or raw data that you can then work with. We talked about, for instance, the inadequacies of things like the Charities Commission website, where you might have a 40-page report and account PDF, which is very hard to scrape data out of unless you're clever. And maybe the Charities Commission could be lobbied to present some of that data in a more user-friendly way, so that fundraisers can get to the heart of what's on offer quicker. I talked about I'm from the Hippodrome, and we're part of Birmingham Arts Partnership, which is like 14 organisations across the city. We're all contributing our data to Audience Agency, which is an Arts Council funded body. So we are going to be on the brink of having a kind of nationwide data bank of very interesting, deep, rich data of who comes to shows. And I think we, as a body, as a cultural group, can contribute more open data into the mix, so that people like Simon and so forth can dig into that for us. So that was a revelation to me, that we've got more to contribute from the arts world, but that could be of some use.
That's brilliant, thank you. Deep and rich is a word that you very often hear in relation to data, isn't it? And it's like, I know, and that's when I have to remember that they're not just numbers, it's people, because then I get that it's deep and rich, but when it's just a pile of numbers, I get nothing. Okay, art, analytics and audiences. Chris is here, so rather than get him to talk about his own sessions, anyone here willing to have a little contribute? No, it'll be you. Oh yes, thank you, sir. Gentleman upstairs sitting next to Nick, with matching beards. How lovely.
We planned it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, good. It was very helpful to understand how we can measure kind of Twitter analytics more and make sure that we're doing it in the right way, because often you can kind of see all these options of how you should be doing Twitter or Facebook, but actually coming up with a good strategy and plan to make sure that it's all measurable and you can actually action it afterwards was really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Content, collaboration and connectivity. Go on, don't be shy.
I was going to go to that, but they couldn't get connected.
Seriously? Oh, they couldn't get all right. Ooh. All right. In the second, is anybody and nobody here from the first session where they did get connected? Well, that you see, technology is a friend and a foe, isn't it, in that regard? Start playing with and seeing data. Jason De Ponte's section. Go on, please. Oh yeah, Nick, thank you.
Right, it was a really useful session. We got to play with lots of different tools that you can use to manipulate data. And I think one of the other things that's interesting about it is when you look at data visualizations, most of us understand them in the same way. So there's some really rubbish data visualization out there, and there's some really good and simple data visualization, and just having a chance to look through things and think a little bit about what makes sense and what doesn't was quite useful, I think.
Okay. When you say manipulate, so this is another one. Another word, rich, deep, and manipulate. You see, I hear the word manipulate data, and I go, that's not a good thing. I don't think we want that, do we? But what you really mean is get to see it from different angles, is that?
Yeah.
So could you just give us an example?
So, for example, as opposed to it being simply a spreadsheet, which I think is what is a pile of numbers, isn't it?
That is, so I've tried putting words in, it doesn't work.
You can, say, take a spreadsheet, put it on a map, and that might show you the data in a different way, and ideally you put some more data on the map, and that might show you a different thing. Yeah. But, I mean, the other thing that you tend to find is that it tends to raise more questions than it answers, and the tool you've got tends not to be very good at answering the questions you've just raised. But
those questions might then set you on a new line of inquiry or a more enlightened line of inquiry, which I think is part of the when you're time poor and data rich, that might be a good thing. That's great. Thank you very much. And making your digital mark. If anybody'd like to bring out their digital mark, perhaps we can make you a digital mark. Is Karen here?
Yeah, social media cafe.
Huh? Okay, thank you.
Social media cafe had a great response, but yeah, go on then.
We explore some examples of participatory projects and how to involve users in activities. And we were trying to find the problems to discuss, but I think that it was really difficult because we will run out of time.
Mhm.
We had a really good the second workshop was quite interesting. So it was really
If, bear with me just 2 seconds, Karen, so that people on the stream. And now I will check my stream in a moment, see if we've got any questions.
Where's Social Media Cafe now? Have they gone home?
Is it Karen?
Social Media Surgery. Okay.
But Nick, there's the more,
already
you
says
have
the right
more to
little
give.
So they had the problem
That
of
beard, you look like Santa.
they had the issue with as well as that, arts organisations that weren't using social media and how to get them engaged in using social media. So we looked at provocative or dangerous ways to do that. And came up with ideas to create fake Facebook pages and go out on the street with placards and things, infiltrating and being imposters basically for these cultural organisations that had no online presence whatsoever, to force them to get active online and change passwords to Facebook accounts and things like that, so that they could actually take ownership and develop their own digital content in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Also, just looking up on the Twitter stream against the hashtag, Oliver McCall said, so shout out to Ollie, hello, thank you for being on the Twitter stream. Great workshop on visualising and playing with data with Jason DePonte, including the Unsettling World Brain game. So that's something you can all look up at home, for those of you that missed it. The Unsettling World... Huh? Yeah, the Unsettling World Brain game. And perhaps Jason will tweet that link as well.
I'm getting a bit of that now, because every time I look, there's a picture of me looking at my phone on Twitter. Yeah, and it's kind of like, everyone's watching.
Yeah. Jane, pay attention.
I am, I'm looking at the screen.
I know, but that is the thing, isn't it? We'll never know. Okay, before I move to a panel, just to do a little bit of reflection before we wrap up for today. Has anyone else got any questions or comments that have either come out of things that were... So we've had a bit of a roller coaster. We had a kind of call to action from Jane for us to turn the model on its head. We had some really great examples of what data can do within the arts. We also looked at health, and particularly a couple of really interesting things around dementia, quality of life, quality of care. Then you had your workshops, which we've just run through. Has anybody got any questions or comments that where they're at now? Where their thoughts are? Thank you. You can have a little bit of a scurry. Just because there's one person putting their hands up, I'm going to ask again, so just have a little think.
Hello, I'm Britta from Ace Dance and Music, and it's just a general kind of observation, really, that a lot of the work that I currently do but have been engaged in the past has involved children and young people, and the challenges that presents in then being very active online around all of the consent and the child protection issues that are inherent with working with particular demographics. And just I'm interested to hear from other arts organisations about how they've approached those challenges and overcome them, because I think there are creative ways that you can do things, but bearing in mind some of the obstacles that are put in your place.
Okay. Well, I might go to the panel. I was going to say, so we'll go to the panel and see if those of on the panel have got an experience, and then perhaps Sophia. So yeah, Matt.
We did a project called Ivy Forever, which was a commission for Channel 4 Education to engage 13 to 16-year-olds in sex and drugs using SMS. So we were...
Sorry, when you say engage in sex and drugs, do you mean...
Engaging.
Oh, engaging?
Yes.
Oh. I was going to say, yes, like, did they need a text message to help them?
It was... So this was not long after all the telephone voting scandal had hit all the broadcasters, where they had been caught on that, and it was using mobiles, and it was using difficult subjects. So we spent about 6 to 8 months with Channel 4 and various forms of legal advice to try and deal with that. So I think it's almost the perfect storm of sort of consent, privacy, data protection, child protection, and so on. And I won't go into all of the kind of detail of it, but I think it was onerous, but most of the things that were really onerous about it was just working out how to deal with the various levels, the various sort of onion rings of that. The actual processes that we ultimately came up with were not super sophisticated or super difficult, and they ranged from secure data protection systems for how data was stored, how data was, who had access to it, how it was password protected, all of those kinds of questions. Looking at our suppliers and all the various subcontractors who we worked with, and ensuring that there was a clear chain of command and control there about whether any of them could get access to any of that information. And then within the game itself, building simple tools, like we had a simple language checker which looked out for words like abuse, suicide, rape, and if it detected any of those hot words, it would immediately flag that to a human operator, and then one of us would look at it and then decide on what to do about that. And on the day that the project went live, someone did send a message that said, "This is rubbish, I'm going to kill myself." And we then had to escalate that from me to the commissioning editor at Channel 4, from the commissioning editor at Channel 4 to the legal department, and from the legal department to one of the Channel 4 executive team at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night to decide how to respond to that. And it was pretty obvious that this person was messing around and wasn't actually promising to kill themselves, but we had to do that. So, I think it's even in that circumstance, it is possible to do it without it being insanely hard to do.
Okay. Although, again, in Channel 4, because they're broadcasters, because they're dealing with content all the time, that sort of reaction, there's a protocol in place. My guess is that they. But
we had to create a new one because
right, even so,
they had never done anything like that before.
Yeah. Even if somebody put something like that on a website or on a call, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing that was terrible was we kept getting to a point of going, okay, that's good. You've got it all sorted out. Excellent. We'll just get sign off from this person, and then that person would come down on us like a ton of bricks going, this is insane and ridiculous and far too risky, we want you to do X, Y, Z and G, and then that would get signed off, and then it would go up to the next level, and they would say, this is ridiculous, I can't believe this is so shambolic, we need to see P, Q, Z and R again, and we want double G, and so it was that sort of process.
So it can be done, and so, but when you are, I guess if you, in terms of Ace Dance, if you're just working not with a massive organisation, it might still be about thinking of some of those systems and not necessarily having that escalation process in quite the same way.
I'd be really happy to chat if you want to follow up on any of that.
Yeah. Now you see, I know Peter's not in the room now, so she's not here to answer for me, but you see, that's the sort of thing you'd think that the Arts Council would kind of gather all the good practice and put it in one place. Now, somebody's probably going to tell me that they have, but please, if they have, please tweet in and tell me where it is, so that small organisations who are pressed for time can just download the learning instead of learning themselves. But again, if we had sort of scrapable FOI, open data about evaluation from funded projects, that'd be the sort of thing we could find out.
Just on that sharing, the gov.uk people do fantastic terms and conditions that are really simple. Those kinds of things that you click the box on and then you read. No one ever reads them and they're always really long. And we always used to just go to the BBC and take the BBC's ones and steal those. And now, but the Gov UK ones are actually like the BBC ones, but they're in English. Right. And they're really, really good. And they're actually saying, come and use these things. And they have a lot of those standardised kind of permission things, licensing, all of that kind of stuff that you can use in your own projects. And it's a really good place to look at if you need terms and conditions for kind of acceptance, particularly around all the stuff with younger audiences.
Great, thank you very much. Sophia, you had it.
Hi. Today's session with Chris was really good because it's allowed me to really think about how we not only try to use our data analytics to build our audiences, but also how we build the offline audiences as well, because we really want to reach into those communities, deal with the emotions. I'm dealing on the Longbridge art public project at the moment, and there's a lot of engagement, a lot of conversations, but a lot of those audiences don't use online facilities, so it's how we can transfer and share that information with the online users to the offline users. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions that we can glean some information or some help from our panel? Anything else that you want to think about, know a bit more about? I am right in thinking that, well, certainly, sorry, I'm looking at you, Lara, because I should have checked this in advance, but I did hear that there'll be more blog posts, perhaps for you and perhaps Chris as well. There'll be more blog posts, there'll be more information coming out of this so that people... I always hate it, don't you hate it when you go to a conference and then they go, continue the dialogue online, because it's always a bit, really, isn't it? But... Yeah, I know, exactly. I'm just whispering into people's live stream. Actually, there's a tweet that says, you've been in my, Hello Culture, you've been in my ears all afternoon as I've been writing a report, stolen a few phrases and words. Probably not that one, is my guess. But there is going to be some follow-up. Do you want to say a little bit about that, Laura? Sorry, I completely put her on the spot here, but it just struck me that that was a useful thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think most of the panellists today have agreed, or about to agree, to do some follow-up blogs for us, just so they're all hosted on Polar Roads and Polar Bears that Chris, you've probably seen that Jane's blog earlier, Sarah's, who else did a blog?
I've done one.
Clayton did one as well. So we're just going to, and actually what we were talking about is that it's more of a discussion and a debate rather than these are the answers, because I think even just something like that, Jane, about go to the Gov UK site is really helpful, because I doubt there is a central resource anywhere. So if we can kind of do that and kind of build up those resources for people, I think that's there. So you can have a wiki, for want of a better word.
Yeah,
did I just do that?
You just did air quotes, and B, you said wiki.
I've finished now.
So you're buying the drinks afterwards, that's for sure. I'm going to wrap up just by asking, and I'm just going to go along that way maybe, just so as a way of kind of concluding our thoughts about today, just to briefly, if you want to, in relation to what you talked about today, what have you heard from someone else or heard in a workshop throughout the day, or even now you've had time to listen to people's reactions? What's your take? One of your takeaway points about today, and what would you like to think some more about? Is that okay?
Sure.
Is that a fair question to you all?
Absolutely. I guess I'm starting.
I'm afraid you are. Yeah, I'm not. Otherwise, we have to know what month your birthday's in, and everyone who's been on a course with me knows that takes ages.
I think data. I say data, not data. That's one thing.
Potato, potato.
I think data is only as good as the discussions it sparks and the talking that we do about what it means and what to do about it. And I came here today with an inkling of what the discussions might be about, and I've been reassured that we actually haven't talked a lot about data itself. We've actually talked about some really fascinating things, and I've heard some inspiring projects that are happening, heard about people doing fantastic work, and I'm really reassured about all the conversations that it sparked, because I think there's a fantastic potential for it to be more influential in what we do. The particular angle that I'm going to think more about is how great data can be an inspiration for creative practice, and how it can almost be material for practice, and I think that's what the arts really do best. And I'd like to see more arts organisations working with data creatively and using it in artworks and to talk to audiences about the arts, and I'm really excited about the potential there.
Thank you. Earlier, somebody commented on stage text ability. Are they still? Oh, they've stopped now. Stage text ability to pick up the quintessence of dust. But what that's reminding me of is that Hamlet quote that, there is nothing that is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Like there's no data isn't good or bad. It's just the thinking that will transform it. So thank you, Matt.
Nice Hamlet data quote
Nice.
there.
I'm here all week. Try the fish.
I'm liking that. I think I really enjoyed the session about health, and the thing that I took away from that was about this issue of evidence. I've always felt slightly nervous about the fact that we as in blast theory and we as in a sector lack evidence for the benefits for what we do. It's a kind of thing that comes up repeatedly about the value of arts and culture in an age of austerity, and I was reassured to hear health professionals saying it is hard to evidence those benefits, but it still leaves me with this sort of itch that I need to scratch, which I still think there's so much more that we can do to begin to understand and be more precise in terms of thinking about what the benefits are of arts and culture in and of themselves and to the wider society.
I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of us fellow travellers will have that kind of, we know it on that sort of instinctual gut level, but we live in a world where people, it's no point telling, no, really, just trust me, it's going to be great. And I understand that. And that correlation is really tough. Because then otherwise, I think sometimes we go to the, like there was the big arts and regeneration sort of argument, culture and regeneration, where instinctively, probably it makes a difference. But really, do we have to sit around and count tourist pounds? I think there's got to be another way. But thank you. Jane?
I've been struck by how many people retweeted the thing I said about arts leaders not getting digital, being unprofessional. And I thought that was just, I wasn't even sure whether I should say that, and I nearly didn't say it. And then obviously lots of other people feel the same.
You're speaking for a nation.
And I was just thinking that's really profound that we all feel like that, and there's obviously that there's a frustration from all of you who are all here trying to get it and understand it like we all do. And then there's a sort of, somewhere above us, there's a sort of smog. So I was struck by that. I personally really like the health session as well. I really liked this idea when they were talking about the dementia project of how an iPad and the behaviour that you have with an iPad and the idea of memories you have as an individual, and how the iPad might be a way to unlock and connect people with memories that they, because of their dementia, are having trouble connecting with, and that the actual technology and the behaviour kind of cuts through the dementia in some way. I thought that was really, really interesting. And there's really something in that. I kind of don't know what, but it's fascinating.
Really, and particularly, as Trevelyan pointed out, at a point when the clinical interventions are limited.
Yeah.
So I do wonder sometimes, though, whenever they've run out of other options, that's when they bring culture in. It's like, oh God, nothing else works, sod it, let's try art. I really am a bit sweary, sorry, everybody. It's a dream. But yes, I think it's very inspiring. And if
it's such a simple thing, because it's actually treating the person and their personal stories as the problem is, how do you connect people to their own memories? Yeah. And then that's a really nice way around that.
Yeah. But back to your point about about leaders, cultural leaders. If you had a cultural leader who said, "Oh God, books, I never read them. I don't think it's digital is now a sort of, it's a cultural, it's a thing on its own. It's a media all of its own. But if you had a cultural leader who said, "Oh, I don't read. Frankly, I don't get it. All these young people are doing it. Why should I?"
I was thinking it'd be a bit like saying that you run a physical building, but you'd not know anything about about transport. That would be the sort of equivalent. Like, oh, I don't know anything about buses and cars and bikes. Really, we just run a physical venue. Like all the issues that people have getting here, I don't need to understand that as a leader, but of course you do. Yeah. Strategically, you've got to think about programming and access and parking and all that stuff. And it's a very similar sort of thing. It's not, it shouldn't define you, but it absolutely influences everything you do. Access.
Does anyone say that though?
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They
do say that about digital.
They do say that about digital.
Yeah, people do.
What the people say, I don't get digital.
And it's none of my concern.
I don't get Twitter.
I don't get Twitter. I don't get digital.
But that's
Can you talk to the person in marketing?
I don't get Twitter is not the same as I don't get digital, is it?
But it usually leads to I don't get Twitter or I don't do Facebook. I don't really actually like. I don't really like technology. I don't really. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I've heard people in very senior positions, and I can't possibly say who, say things like that, and I'm just going.
Name and shame.
Are you seriously? Yeah. You don't have to like it. It's not. You don't have to do it. You don't have to go on a holiday with your mobile phone.
I think it's actually
it's different.
It's indicative of a broader. It's a broader problem though, because it's not actually about the technology itself. It's about a way of working or a way of looking at the world, and an openness to maybe changes that are occurring and new ways of working that might actually be better than past ways. And I think that it's really about learning and evolving as an individual and as a society, and that technology is just one of the sort of
which is why the transport model works, because it's not you don't have to learn about transport, but you have to learn about behaviour.
Yeah.
And you have to learn about the behaviour in digital, and that's what people need to know, not how does Twitter work, but what are people doing with it.
Thank you, Joe. Clayton.
Hi, thanks. Some of the things I've got from today, well, coming from a small arts organisation, we've been on a digital journey for some time. We've actually played around with the idea of data visualizations through projects. For example, in 2010, we ran a project with young people called Radius 5, which was a collective, a crowdsourcing of data for a kind of presentation about how young people engage with culture within a particular geographic area of the city. So we're kind of playing around with some of this, but I'd still say that it was, before I came here today, and I suppose still and beyond, I'm going to have certain levels of frustrations around, well, what does this actually mean? But I think things have started to cement in a little bit more. I'm starting to understand the difference and distinctions between the private data that you have internally as an organisation and what that means to your organisation, and then scaling of that. So with the Rijksmuseum, for example, it's obviously they've got a huge catalogue of data that they can export externally. For a smaller organisation, maybe that's not such a big issue for us to concentrate on, but then there's a public side of data, and it's listening to what Matt was saying with Blasteri and how they're using that for creative interventions, which I think was quite interesting. But I also think there's another pool, a kind of collector, a more an in-between zone of collective data that, and I was speaking to you earlier on about this, where maybe within a particular geographic area, like within Birmingham, maybe a grouping of organisations could come together and understand what is the data between all of these organisations and what are the patterns between all these organisations. But it might be, that might not work in the same way where we might work with South Asian arts organisations across the country and collectively pull our data and see how that might pattern up and work. So I'm getting less frustrated with it. I'm feeling like I'm understanding that what the route map is. I still don't know how to tackle it, but I can see that I'm starting to learn a bit more from today's session about how data can be managed within organisations.
I think, yes, because actually I don't know if the question is what does it mean so much as what new questions does it raise? I think that's the thing I've come away with. It's just like, data is as good as the questions it's raised, which I think I'm now quoting, I think maybe you, Tandy. But so I think that's, I think that, as you say, a search for meaning might be not as useful as a search for understanding, which I think is a slightly nuanced, very nuanced for 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Deep and sweary. You got the full package today.
I've got 2 things really, neither deep nor sweary. I don't think. Well, who knows? I think the first one's kind of what's been, I think, very clear throughout the whole day, but I think was actually sort of stated really within the second session, was the way that actually the cross-sector nature of the conversation and how that's required. And also, I suppose more than that, how open data itself doesn't really know the boundaries of sectors. So actually, when you're accessing open data, it could come from anywhere. So I think the broader the conversation, the better, is one thing. The other thing was my general excitement, I think, from the 2 workshops I went to, but for the same reason. So I went to Karen's and went to Jason's workshops, and it was a disruptive nature, which I really liked. So using data mining, or obtaining data in order to cause problems. So whether it was the example of sort of, or to make points, but whether it's sort of like the S-men kind of thing, or moving that into the world brain. It's that idea of taking data and then being very, very sort of provocative with it. And I particularly liked the extra with world brain, where actually you go as far as using the mining techniques, but at the very end you just make it up, because and I think that shift in terms of actually that use of word playfulness, I think it's really exciting, and it's also kind of cautionary.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Sarah.
I overall liked the shift in the conversation around data. I thought a lot of what people were saying and contributing was really insightful, but also not going what is data, or not the clarification conversation, but actually the opportunity conversation. And it also felt that we were working, if for it to be a success, we need to look at it as the network. We are the network. We are the data network in the culture sector. And how can we be networked across? And it felt like we could all collaborate. And if we hold the data to ourselves, then we're just going to keep telling ourselves what we want to hear. So it felt to me like a shift, and it felt also like the next step is around what do we do with this? How do we take that back for ourselves, and then how do we come back as a network, I think is important. How do we, who's not in this room and who do we need to share that with? Because that's the legacy of it, is if someone wasn't here today, they should know about it. Why should they know about it? Because there was a huge amount of rich conversation and rich sharing of practice. So that's what it feels like.
That's lovely. It's a very good note. I'm not going to say very much more. I think that's a great note to end on. As you may know, I'm very keen on talking about networks, and I tend to talk about the development of human networks, about making those connections and it being like a string bag, and every point on the connection is like a knot. And if you have a complete string bag, you know, if you have a complete network, it carries weight. It can carry your career, it can carry your life, it can carry more than if you have partial ones. So maybe that's our next challenge to all of us, is to go out and make more connections and tell more people about this and share your insights and your work. And we have a variety of ways to do that, because there's this thing called the internet, but that's a spoiler alert. I'm telling you the plot. That's all we have time for today, in true telly host time, our old enemy. I will just take 2 minutes of your time, if I may. I think we'd like, again, we've had a lot of value from the sponsors, Arts Council of England, Digital Birmingham, our hosts here at BCU, so a little round of applause for them. Thank you very much. If any of you go to Slimming World, you'll be familiar with this bit, because everybody has a weight loss that needs clapping, so there'll be lots of clapping now. Our panel conveners and our keynote speaker, Jane Finnis, but everyone who's spoken today, can we give them a little sign of appreciation? £2 off, what are you going for next week? This event was made possible, curated and created by Lara Ratnaraja and Simon Whitehouse. And so I think we've all appreciated the care with which panels were stitched together, with which the flow of information and the way that you've been given these information along the day has been put together. And that, as you can imagine, was no accident. And we thank Charmaine for logistics, but can we please give a huge round of applause for Lara and Simon, to thank them for all their hard work. A final shout out to our media partner, Polaroids and Polar Bears, otherwise known as Chris. And again, if you go back onto the blog, there's also his new professional blog where you can find out more about the arts world here in the West Midlands. A massive thank you to Stage Tech, and also our sort of unsung heroes of the day. Again, all the chaps, but particularly Julia and Nat at Rebel Uncut. Thank you very much for the live stream. I'm sure if the internet could clap, it would do, but can you on its behalf? Oh, 1,700, she shoots, she scores. That's it, thank you very much indeed. We have some drinks and face-to-face networking, or otherwise known as talking, downstairs. Please do stay for a drink. Thank you for your time and attention. And that's it for Hello Culture 2014. Thank you very much for coming.